Rewiring the bus, I've had a lot of questions about that. I rewired the bus and converted it to 12 volt. I wouldn't normally do this unless if you have lots of issues. My alternator was bad, my wiring was bad, everything was bad. It, a lot of corrosion issues. I'm talking 6-8 inches a foot up on the wire from terminal ends in some places. Between that and the alternator being bad and the cost I got to redo it, I decided to go ahead and convert it to 12 volt. That let me put standard equipment, alternator and starter on it that I can get anywhere very readily and very cheaply. I didn't change a whole lot. Switched it over to the 12 volt. I did move the wipers down here. Obviously the ignition and the brake, I moved that too. I know it's not electrical, but I moved the shifter over to this side. All the switches pretty much work except for the hazard. Obviously my headlights, my clearance lights, driver's light. The defrost I'm actually still working on, but I'll tell you how I can correct that in a future video. And then fast idle. My emergency shutdown doesn't work. It will, but it's not now. It's actually froze up in the housing. All the gauges I switched over were out of a Freightliner Classic. I've got, obviously the whole set I picked up. The oil pressure is mechanical, so I've got a tube running from here all the way to the engine. I had to update the sending unit for the water temperature. Everything else worked. Fuel gauge, I've still actually been thinking about that. I may run the 24 volt one. I may not. I had to update the headlights as well. Luckily, when Greyhound converted to 12 volt, they went through and they put a standard headlight in there. This assembly is good for Freightliners, Kenworths, Peterbilts. All the older trucks used them. Obviously, all the other lights were updated as well. Now, I've still got a lot of cleaning up to do, wire-wise. But this is enough to give you a general idea of how I did it. This bundle right here is all of the OEM wires that go up to the A pillar and the B pillar. I actually kept them in case I wanted to run, something in the future. This is a buck converter that kicks 12 volt up to 24 volt. I needed that because the Skinner valves in the back for the shutoffs and the high idles and all that stuff is all 24 volt, and I didn't want to switch them over. So I do have a little bit of 24 volt stuff still left on here. I mean, this is a pretty cut and dry system. This is my relay for the accessory. Goes up to, you got a battery and then you got a relay circuit breaker box, or fuse box in my case. I did go with all automotive style fuses. Different junction points. There's no junctions hidden in the bus. All the wires are straight to and straight from. I do have the flasher relay and a headlight relay, which I had to have because of this type headlight switch that I used. When I went through and did this, I used all 30 amp switches so I could eliminate relays. This is a Grody turn signal switch and headlight. And obviously 4-ways. This is what they call an 18 light version. It's made to handle a pretty good number of amperage. Obviously not a big deal because I've only got a handful of brake lights and turn signals that go through this. But you can put up to 18 lights on this. That's why I had to have the relay for the headlight, because the way that switches back and forth, it doesn't technically go through the switch. The switch just works a relay and then it switches it between high and low. Here's the way I did the alternator. I just made a little bracket, mounted it off the motor mount bracket. See if I can step back and let some sunlight in there. I've obviously got to, heat shrink this and stuff, but this was up here just for testing. I wanted to be sure it didn't matter which way it went. It doesn't on these, but everything's updated to a new style plug and temperature sensor. Depending on what you do, you gotta be careful that this doesn't stick out much further than this, because you'll be into the door when you slam it. I've still got all the wiring back here I need to clean up. I've just got it temporarily strung right now, just to be sure that everything works, which it does. We've actually taken it out and test driven it, and it did fine. The lights, I did go LED top and bottom. The center ones are dead. They don't do anything. I don't have any reverse lights yet. I'm probably going to put them on a switch. I haven't overly decided on how I'm going to do that yet, mainly for the fact that I have severe night vision issues, so I don't drive at night anyway. When you do all this, one thing you need to be sure of is to be sure that you can switch your batteries around. You don't want to be rocking 24 volt. I have switched them over to 12 volt. I don't have the 8D anymore. Got rid of them as well. They were in rough shape. These are a lot cheaper, readily available, and will do the job just fine. I do have the master cutoff still intact for the coach side, or for the chassis side of things. I've got 2 more cutoffs down there that I may install for the house batteries. I do plan on putting a cross between the house batteries and the coach batteries, in case one of them goes dead. They're easily chargeable. Like I say, pretty much my biggest issue are these blower motors. Getting them, because I read that, if you take a 24 volt motor, switch it over to 12 volts, it's going to run half the speed, blah, blah, blah. These are a lot less. And they pull a pretty good amount of amps on those, and those buck converters are only good for, 5 amps or so. Another thing I got to do is the door lock. I actually totally forgot about that. Mild technicalities, I like to say, but I need to get that hooked up. That's for the air lock. What I did, the harness that runs across the bottom, that tube is my pressure line for my oil pressure gauge. Obviously the wires go back there to all the sensors and stuff. When you're doing this, I suggest running 2 or 3 different lines back there so you've got some extras. I've got headlight wiring that goes across that still needs to be buttoned up. The wire I use is a heavy duty industrial stuff. It is heat resistant, oil resistant. It's actually got a clear coating over top of the rubber coating over top of the wire. All solid strand copper. Like I say, the toggle switches I used were just run-of-the-mill toggle switches. They are all high amp switches. That way, like I said, I could get rid of the relays. But we've test driven it, and so far everything has worked fine. So that's kind of exhilarating, I guess. But that's just kind of a quick overview of how I did the rewire. If you have any questions, just let me know and I'll answer them the best I can. You guys be safe and have a good one out there.